Hi, and welcome to You Got Moxie, the podcast about the how of change making. I'm Julie Ann Crommett, your host, and I'm so excited to introduce today Jeanell English. She's going to talk to us about her own journey change making and how to recharge. Part of Jeanell's journey was actually working at the Oscars and implementing the first set of inclusion standards. She's going to walk us through that journey and the way she approached it with filmmakers. She's also going to share a bit about the importance of curiosity and questioning as a part of change making. And she also has an incredible announcement around her new business and some exciting partnerships. With that, please welcome Jeanell English. It's just an absolute delight and blessing to have the wonderful Jeanell English with us today. Jeanell, welcome into the podcast.
Hi, thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here, truly.
It's amazing to have you here. So we're talking about change making. How do you do it? How do you keep going? How do you recharge? All the good stuff. And I know you really well and know these are some of your favorite topics. So we are blessed.
Yes, we are. I love it.
In starting us off, for our folks at home here, can you share a little bit about yourself, about your story, really? And as part of that story, maybe if there was a moment where you realized change needed to happen, that there was that aha moment, if you will, as part of your life's journey.
Oh my goodness. Yes. I love this question. And I'm not going to do the traditional thing of talking about career, right? Because I think it's so easy to say, I had a career. But interestingly, for me, the most formative years of my life were my childhood. I'm the daughter of a therapist and an artist. And I say this because I was always encouraged from a young age to be incredibly expressive, to pursue the things that I loved. I remember from a very young age being in libraries with my sister, just reading, and we played like very quirky games of Barbie and creativity and just creating and moving and expressing was so important to my family. And it's interesting because especially in the Black community, this relationship with therapy and connecting with self and exploring isn't always as accepted. And it definitely wasn't when I was growing up. So I grew up definitely feeling like the strange kid. And at the same time, I was often the only Black person, Black woman in any space that I occupied, whether it was the schools that I was in or the extracurricular activities I was involved in, the first play that I was in where I was cast as the baby brown deer, right? Like all of these moments that you go through, they start to just make you question everything about the world and say, why? Why was I the baby deer? Why am I the only one here? Why does this feel uncomfortable? Why are other kids making fun of my hair, right? And layer on top of that, the therapist and the artist, it was okay to ask why. But oftentimes I realized that not everyone had the answer to the questions. And that really prompted me to do something more. So for me, my formative years and those moments that really directed me were actually as a child and just learning to question everything and do so with genuine curiosity, not from a place of necessarily trying to effectuate change, but genuinely just being curious. And that's kind of how my world started. I was curious about everything. Ended up moving to New York from California for school, then lived in DC and had my first job there. I started my career in equity and inclusion because I was curious, why didn't certain communities have opportunity? Why didn't, this person have a seat at the table? Why didn't the most incredible leader I ever worked for get that promotion, right? So I naturally found myself in the diversity space. Started out in the defense contracting world, which is crazy and not widely known. Shifted into
Did
energy.
not know that, actually. And I've known you a while. I did not know that.
Nobody really knows that, right? But that's how I actually started my career in DEI. It was not actually in entertainment. And I ended up moving into entertainment, worked for Discovery Channel, had the opportunity to live and work asking questions in Europe for almost 8 years. So really working again in the equity and inclusion space, also in production, and then had the opportunity to ask even more questions of one of the oldest institutions in entertainment, that being the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, or the Oscars, which eventually drove me back to the US and back to California. But really, Julianne, it was always for me just learning to ask questions from a very young age and being encouraged to do so.
Love that. Love the idea of change making and realization in your own life came from curiosity, genuine curiosity and questions. It's great.
Literally, yeah.
Literally. And also how liberating in a way that is, of coming from a place of curiosity. This is a theme that keeps resonating across the guests we've had. And I think, like, riffing on this theme a little bit, and by the way, thank you for sharing all of your life experiences with us, including the things that are more difficult, right? Like those otherization moments, right? Which then cause the questions. When you're sitting here and you've observed, okay, this doesn't feel 100% right, and you start asking these questions, for our folks at home, it can start to feel overwhelming, right? Like, where do I begin? Where do I start? Because sometimes these things feel like gigantic. It's systems, or it's like whole parts of something, and the question being, where do I begin? And so for you, how do you think about where you start? Like, when you've made an observation of, like, okay, something needs to change here for the better. It needs to become more equitable. Something's got to shift. How do you know where to start, and how do you make that determination?
Yeah. I am a big believer in focusing on systemic change. I've always been encouraged to, and been reminded in my career and personal life, that we need to be harder on systems and softer on people. And with that lens, my approach to curiosity always starts on a personal level. You cannot effectuate change, you cannot challenge a system until you've established a respect for the person who's on the side of administering that system, until you have respect for their work, for their experience, for their life, for their joy. I mean, how often are we in these positions or roles, right, where people are coming to us and it just jumps straight into the ask. So the curiosity for me always starts at the most basic human level. And that's what I think we all need to do, especially in this time where just beliefs can be so polarized, starting with, how are you? Who are you? Not just jumping into the career piece. And I loved how you even opened this up, right? And really thinking about moments that really define people and shift or change their trajectory. Those are human elements that are very unifying. And for me, that's the important thing about questions. Start with the personal, focus on the relationship, focus on the people. The system, that will come, but without that relationship, it's nearly impossible to tech a system.
It's so spot on what you're talking about, because, a theme that is coming up in the podcast very organically is around trust. And there is no change without trust between people, right? And I love what you're highlighting is, you actually just don't accept the question that somebody brings you. You ask actually more about who they are and what's maybe underneath the question. In entertainment or in storytelling, right, we always say, like, the note behind the note.
Yes.
You're getting to the note behind the note before you can even get to the note itself, right?
Exactly.
Do you have an anecdote or a specific project or initiative where you feel like there was impact or change, or you drove equity? And can you reflect a little bit on how that happened? The who, the what, the how. Kind of walk us maybe through a case study on how you use this curiosity to actually impact change.
Absolutely. Oh, I've got a few. I'll share one of the more recent examples. And this was, in my role at the Academy. And I took the job to really build out what representation, inclusion, and equity would mean for the organization, because I thought I would have the impact on the industry that I was looking to have. And to be honest, I think it did. And one of the initiatives I was tasked with bringing to fruition was inclusion standards for Best Picture consideration, that shiny Oscar that everyone in the industry wanted, right? So here we are, like this organization of artists that's saying we value diversity, we value inclusion, we value a more accessible industry, right? How do you actually codify those values? And for me, that was what the inclusion standards represent. That said, right, you're now putting a new requirement for realizing diversity and inclusion in the entertainment space. That is not always a loved a loved notion at all. Like the messages, the hate mail, people were like, why are you changing the Oscars? This is not about diversity. Da, 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 da. I was like, you're right, it's not. It's about art, and it's about the shared belief that a more diverse and inclusive and accessible community of artists is better for this industry. We all benefit from this, right? I don't take any of the responses to rolling out something new personal, right? Like change is scary, especially in the entertainment world where everyone wants relevance, they want opportunity. It's so changing anything within a very legacy centered industry is hard. That said, it wasn't as hard when I started to take a personal approach to implementing the change. And by that, I responded to every email that I got. I responded to messages. I would make time to jump on a Zoom with a filmmaker based anywhere in the world, right? Which is also, I didn't sleep much in that job, honestly. That said, though, it was incredible to really sit and talk to some of these filmmakers who were saying, I don't understand what this means. I want to be able to tell the stories that I want to tell. I want to be able to do this. I want to do that. And I was like, and you should. Let's have a conversation about what filmmaking looks like in your community, where you are. How did you get started, right? And you start to understand people's personal journeys and oftentimes struggles in getting into this industry. And you start to realize like, wow, I wish I had had an apprenticeship program on this film to introduce me to XYZ. I wish that more people watched my film. I wish. And all of a sudden people were sharing their hopes and wishes for their art. And the solution that I was able to offer to them was a solution that a more diverse industry could provide. You wish more people saw your film. That's incredible. Did you talk to your distributor to understand who sits on their marketing team? Because in order to reach as many audiences, you should have as many different perspectives and people represented in that department. Oh, I hadn't thought about that. And I said, great. Well, when you think about that and you ask that question to your distributor, you should also know that's one way your film can qualify for Best Picture, having representation in that marketing and PR arm of your distributor. And that's only going to help your film reach more people. Oh, you mentioned there's actually a tax incentive for working with a local women's college and bringing more opportunities for filmmaking here. That's incredible. That's another way you can meet the standard, right? So when you started to have these very personal conversations and you started to show that there was actually a benefit in this change for all who were involved, then this aha moment happened where this wasn't a scary change. This wasn't, woke culture taking over. It was literally just a belief that art thrives from diversity. And that's it. And again, it required, though, a very personal touch to rolling out change to actually effectuate and minimize the resistance.
Amazing. And I think just circling back to your point earlier, you were making it about the human. And in this case, you were also making it about the artist, which I think is beautiful. You started your story talking about how you were raised and the influences in you, and that creativity started from a young age, and then harnessing that into these conversations is something I'm also hearing of the insights you're sharing. So for folks at home, who, maybe sit in creative fields or maybe feel like sometimes that's an impediment to a conversation. Actually, maybe it's the opposite. Maybe that's the unlocking mechanism, is to actually talk about it from the art as opposed to necessarily from the issue at hand. I thought that was also really beautiful what you shared in those conversations with filmmakers, with the aha.
Art is a conversation starter for me. It always has,
Right?
right? Like if there's something uncomfortable that you don't really want to talk about, maybe it's even in your marriage or with your friends. It's like, hey, let's go watch this film. How did you feel about that? Because you're giving me Edward Scissorhand vibes today. Like, you can literally use whatever example you want to help broker a conversation. And that's something that I think art is uniquely positioned to do. And you're able to introduce different perspectives in a way that's not meant to harm, but can actually disarm.
That's absolutely right. Not meant to harm, but disarm. Oh, beautiful. And also, I think, by the way, I do love the reference of you're feeling a little Edward Scissorhands to me today. That is great.
Rewatched that movie, and I have to say, I forgot how much I loved it. It's so good.
So good. It's so good. Not for nothing, my best friend from college might have walked down the aisle to the Edward Scissorhands theme.
I thought you were going to say something else, but yes, that is also cool.
Yes. It was actually really beautiful. She walked herself down the aisle. Her mother had passed, and her father and her have a strained relationship. And so she actually walked herself down the aisle to the Edward Scissorhands theme. Wow. And so when you say that movie, it just hit in a very personal memory space for me. So just also thank you.
That's really special. Who would have thought? Edward Scissorhands.
Right. Edward Scissorhands. And then one of our friends was like, she stole my plan. I was like, oh my gosh, really, Chris?
Okay, yes. Julian, I need to integrate into your friend group a little more, because that is the best thing I have ever heard, right? Like ever heard.
Please. Oh my God, we will integrate you. So that's Laura and Chris who are probably going to listen to this whole podcast. So Laura Chogan and Chris Hanley, there's your shout out. And Jeanell is going to join our friend group, which sounds amazing. I think this is great.
I can't wait.
Oh my God. And, I'd be remiss, Jeanell, if I didn't ask you about a topic that is a part of change making. You referenced a little bit earlier, but you have definitely spoken very publicly about, which is, how do you recharge and take care of yourself when you're in the midst of trying to make change around you, when you're in the midst of life, quite frankly? And how do you think about that, and where do you find your sources of joy, of recharge, of gift to self? And what insights can you share with our audience around this question of regeneration and self-love?
Ooh, this is a whole other podcast, Julie.
Yes, it is. I know it is.
It really is. And I think that my answer changes depending on what season I'm in. And it's become increasingly more important for me as my career has evolved, as I'm pursuing entrepreneurship, to really check in and say, what do I need today? Something that was super easy for me to implement. Wednesdays used to be my day from hell. I was stacked in meetings, like most of us are, middle of the week, starting at 7, 8 in the morning, 6, 7, then a dinner, then whatever. I don't work Wednesday mornings anymore. I do not take meetings. I carve out that time for me. I sign up for a spin class. I take my dog, Duke Ellington, on a long walk. We sit at a cafe and we read, we listen to music. We take the time to not be at home, but to be somewhere else that feels good on Wednesday mornings. It's a small way of reclaiming something that kept me really busy and felt a little stressful. But it's been an important constant in my journey of just figuring out what rest really looks like. I'm a huge advocate of the book Rest is Resistance by Tricia Hersey. And that book just has really reminded me that in order to be my brightest, most resilient, most creative self, I do need to invest in rest. And that doesn't always mean a nap. it means finding the places that actually recharge you, whether that's spending time with my good friends or my new friends, or, going out to watch a film, or, taking time to do some soul cycle. All of that it's a way of resting. It gives me more energy. It gets me excited about things. And I'm actively carving out time to say yes to things that are also going to be fun.
Absolutely. And I think that I love this idea that you just took a moment of time on your calendar every week that was causing you more stress. And you said, I'm going to change that right now. And I'm thinking about our listeners at home. Hey, that's a very solid thing that anybody can go do tomorrow is look at your calendar and think about where is that time for you? And what does that look like? I think it's so practical, Jeanell. I think it's so great. And side note, your dog is named Duke Ellington.
Yes, he is. We're a jazzy little family over here.
Yes.
Great.
So, oh my God, you and I have to offsides about this. I'm a jazz nut. I grew up listening to jazz. I sing jazz. I come from a family of musicians. So this is a whole other podcast for us to talk about.
Oh my goodness. I cannot wait. I cannot wait.
I cannot wait. Well, and before we let you go, Jeanell, you have been building something new. And I'd love for you to share a little bit about that. And then specifically something really important that just happened that we want to take a moment and celebrate with that beautiful new business of yours.
Absolutely. I have been building a incredible community-centered independent publishing company that is really focused on creating more IP ownership and access for artists, for creatives, for storytellers who have been far too long marginalized in creative spaces. And it has been this beautiful labor of love inspired by what I saw at the Academy. A lot of the communities I was advocating for didn't own enough of their stories to truly be dangerous in this industry. And Elizabeth and Minnie Publishing is my attempt to help change that. And I'm so blessed. I'm so privileged to have an incredible business partner, Tanya Sam. Elizabeth and Minnie is actually named after my great grandmother, Elizabeth, and my business partner, Tanya's grandmother, Minnie. And we really wanted to bring these women, our ancestors, along in this journey with us. And Elizabeth and Minnie Publishing, we were just honored by being named the official publisher of the Harlem Book Fair. And that means we have the joy and delight of being able to publish 2 of the manuscripts that have come through the book fair this year as a part of our slate. I think, for us, it's so important to create space for books, for stories from our community to be championed. And there's no better way to do that than at the Harlem Book Fair.
That is incredible news. First of all, for us to keep checking out Elizabeth and Minnie, congratulations on launching the company, you and your business partner, and for your great grandmothers and grandmothers be on the journey with you, which is a thing of beauty. By the way, I'm named after my grandmother and my mother, my abuela Julie, and my mom Ana. So I carry that with me very deeply. And so I'm honored in a way that this is how you've approached your business, and that the ancestors are with you. And then secondly, on the Harlem Book Fair, let us take a moment and just take a moment of gratitude and excitement for what's to come from those manuscripts and that partnership. So huge congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And honestly, anyone who wants to read with us, we have a really active, fun book club community that is growing steadily and traveling the world together. So you can definitely get involved and check us out on Instagram at Elizabeth and Minnie or elizabethminnie.com if you want to submit a manuscript. Love to read it.
Oh my gosh. Well, you heard it here, folks. elizabethminnie.com and submit your manuscript. And I'm just going to say it because you're going to be at the, this huge partner for the Harlem Book Fair here going forward, is we're going to find the next County Cullum. We're going to find the next Nella Larson. And if folks don't know who those names are, you need to check them out because everybody knows Langston Hughes, but we're going to name everybody else that came out of the Harlem Renaissance, including these new authors you're going to be working with.
Oh, Oh, thank you so much, Julie Ann. And yes, I love the name drops. Let's keep it coming. This is great.
Let's keep it coming. Let's keep it coming. And with that, Jeanell English, thank you for joining us today on You Got Moxie.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thanks again for joining us for You Got Moxie. Continue to follow us and listen to your favorite episodes at collectivemoxie.com. That's collectivemoxie.com. We're excited to see you next time. Take care.